Dr. Suresh, specifically Jagdish, Sanjay, all of you for this very kind and humbling invitation. I believe the honor should be bestowed upon you as a community who continues to do this work to celebrate Ambedkar's legacy, but also the work going forward to annihilate caste. So I thank you all, and I want to thank our honorable guest, the Consulate General, Sridhar, and the honorable guest, our monk, who delivered a beautiful opening statement about Buddha. Oh, okay, thank you, Sanjay. Now it's better. I do have a PowerPoint that I want to start with, and it may be up, but I may have to stand here so I can see the slides. If it's okay, I may be able, I don't want to crowd out the honorable guest. Please tell me if I'm blocking her view. I don't want to do that. Good, I can see this now.
Or if you wanted to step down and...
Oh, that might be better, yeah. That will be better. Yeah, sure. Thank you. So let me begin by first introducing the title of my talk, The Continuing Legacy of Dr. BR Ambedkar. We can go to the next slide. And this is how I open all of my work over my discovery of the profound genius of Dr. Ambedkar. I think Suresh gave us a beautiful opening statement about how many different areas he made his achievement. And what I say in the opening statement is that for me, and I ask anyone, any person of Indus background, South Asian background in particular, Indian background, can you answer this one question? How is it that the greatest genius, the greatest mind of the 20th century, was not of Brahmin descent or any of the upper castes? Oops, it's disappeared. So how is it that the greatest thinker was not of an upper caste, particularly Brahmin background, but Dalit background? And if you pose that question, you see a blank stare, because nobody seems to answer the question to that mystery. There we go. And I also try to look at his comparison with so many other great minds and leaders fighting for liberation from colonization. Or Dr. Suresh mentioned slavery here in the United States. And I can't think of a single example of someone who also was a great mind and the leader of a social movement. It would be like taking Dr. Martin Luther King, the great inspiring leader of a social movement, but if you know of W.E.B. Du Bois in 1905, the greatest thinker arguably of the 20th century that brought race and racism to the forefront of all sociological thinkers. But with Dr. Ambedkar, you have both examples in one human being living in one time period, overshadowed by Gandhi, who of course led the liberation against decolonization from the British Empire. Dr. Ambedkar was fighting against the internal colonization during the same period. I don't know of an example of anything like this around the world. So I say the true depth of his ideas, it's still yet to come. It gives us hope for the future. So the next slide. I'm so glad that Dr. Suresh introduced the Buddha and the Karl Marx, because this is the text I wanted to focus on. And I want to begin with just discussing what's called the Creed of the Buddha, which he opens up the text with. It was a small pamphlet that was discovered at his death in his small home that was unfinished. And so the text we have is only about 20 pages long. If he had the opportunity, he would have obviously developed this into many of his other great works: Annihilation of Caste, Philosophy of Hinduism, Riddles of Hinduism, Buddha and the Dhamma, etc. So let me begin with this, what he says is the Creed of the Buddha. Unlike the Marxists and the communists who are atheists, religion is necessary for a free society. Many of us come from religious backgrounds. Perhaps in this room, many of us come from the Buddhist tradition, or maybe Christian or Muslim. But, this is his judgment, not every religion is worth having. Religion must relate to the facts of life. In other words, religion does have something to do with economy, because economy has to deal with the facts of life. Not theories and speculations about God, soul, heaven, or earth. Look at number 4. Most religions think they have a God, and that's the centerpiece. He's saying, think about the courage and the genius of this statement. For someone to say, it's wrong to make God the center of religion. So he's not an atheist denying the existence of God. He's saying the centrality of that. Human condition, human well-being, human compassion and love for the other human being. That's the center. Look at this statement. Wrong to make the salvation of the soul the center of the religion. If one individual said that, okay, I'm just going to take care of myself and not care about society, that's not right. Our honorable monk had mentioned that it's the action. It's not just the status of purity at birth, but what do you do at that point? Next slide. Ritualism and sacrifice. Real is superfluous. It's not what leads to any kind of outcome. Real religion lives in the heart of man, not in the Shastras. Morality has to be the center. Morality has to be the ideal of life. Next slide. And this is where we can start to compare with the Marxist ideal, and we'll conclude because Marxism and communism is not the solution. And he's saying this in 1950, not in 1989 when the Cold War ended. Function of religion is to reconstruct the world. The unhappiness in the world is due to conflict of interest, and the only way to solve it is to follow the Ashtanga Marga. Private ownership of property brings power to one class and sorrow to another. It is necessary for the good of society that this sorrow be removed by removing its cause. He's not saying, like the communists, eliminate property. It's talking about the cause of suffering. So last slide for this section. Arguably the most important parts. All human beings are equal. Worth and not birth is the measure of man. Purity at birth, as Honorable Monk said. But what does Hinduism and caste do? It assigns impurity at birth by dividing natural human beings who are all equal into different castes. Maitri, or fellowship towards all, must never be abandoned. Everyone has a right to learn. That is the basis of all human development and freedom. Learning without internal character, as our monk said, is dangerous. And then last, hopefully, slide. This I'll come through very quickly. The main point here, I don't want to read all this for the sake of time, but if we understand the fact that we're limited in our time on this earth, everything has to change. We too have to die. But if we understand this, it gives us strength, not fear. It gives us courage to say, with this time, what are we going to do? That's how I interpret these great statements. Okay, so the next slide we have. This is a long quote at the end of the text. And what I'd like to do is just quickly read it. And the next slide will be a conclusion. And I'll conclude my presentation. But to pick up on where Dr. Suresh left off, this is the last paragraph of his text. Humanity does not only want economic values, it wants spiritual values to be retained. Permanent dictatorship has paid no attention to spiritual values and does not seem to intend to. Man must grow materially as well as spiritually. Society has been aiming to lay a new foundation, and it was summarized by the French Revolution in 3 words: fraternity, liberty, and equality. We've heard this many times. But look at this, and Dr. Suresh had already mentioned this. The French Revolution welcomed this slogan, but it didn't produce the equality. Russian Revolution is great. It aimed to produce the equality, but it took away the fraternity and the liberty. Equality will be of no value without fraternity or liberty. It seems to me that the 3 can only coexist in the way of the Buddha. Communism can give one, maybe the equality, but not all. So let's see the last slide. So the questions I try to explore, and I want all of us to explore as well. We saw the dangers of communism in the 20th century. We don't see any chance for communism after 1989. Not in Modi's controlled India, not in even communist China with its capitalism, and of course in the West, where industrial capitalism was born. Fine. Here's capitalism, it's here to stay. The question is, though, how do we link this with the true democracy, the lifelong quest of Ambedkar, who, by the way, as Dr. Suresh said, laid the foundations for modern democratic India, first of all, by chairing the Constitution, but second of all, really thinking deeply about what equality means. He spent his whole life. The lifelong goal to abolish caste, we all know that you cannot have a caste system in society and culture and a democratic constitution. And as a matter of fact, even though he wrote the Constitution or chaired the drafting commission, at the very end he said, if we can't get rid of caste, then this great democratic promise is just going to sink into the swamp of pain, suffering, inequality. More caste creating more caste, more distance between more human beings, less freedom. So you can't have a democracy without freedom. And then the point is about Buddhism as a type of liberation and antidote of how we could live freely where no one has the power. Even the Buddha said, I don't want to appoint my successor, but to kind of have a communitarian idea, not communist, communitarian idea of shared existence. We live for the other. We live for the compassion for the other. So one of the things I look at here is, in my next point, the Constitution may eliminate discrimination on the basis of caste. In the US Constitution, they eliminate discrimination on the basis of race. And they liberated the slaves from slavery after the Civil War, the black slaves. But eliminating discrimination on the basis of caste is not the same thing as eliminating the caste system. The analogy is eliminating discrimination on the basis of race, which our Constitution should provide, has not gotten rid of the racism. Those of you that have immigrated here, and you come to the US, for example, a Western white majority society, I don't think there's a single person in the room, including myself, who grew up here, and my family when they immigrated, that did not face some racism. You know this is true at some point. So eliminating discrimination on the basis of race does not get rid of racism. Same thing can be applied to caste. That's why casteism still exists. It's been almost 70 years, 66 years since since independence, 1948. Here's our challenge. From Buddhism, we can practice nonviolence, peaceful transformation of the internal disposition, not forcing someone to do something, as Dr. Suresh said. But it has to be revolutionary. That's the legacy of Ambedkar. It's not enough to say, oh, we'll reform this or change this. Truly believing, like you all do, that we can live in a world without casteism. Maybe in the US context or Western context, we people of color and we minorities and immigrants can live in a world without racism. And this is one of the things I have to think through. It would be very interesting to compare whether it's the economics field or the religious realm, but is there a way to have a conversation with even science? Now this may sound very strange. Why are you bringing up evolutionary development? It would appear, if it's true, even from a scientific perspective, that every living being is striving towards equality, the right to life, liberty, and dignity. So it seems to me, over the course of 7,000 years, 5,000 years, the earliest civilizations around the world, up to now, that freedom is an instinct that cannot be deprived. From birth to death, even a slight chance at freedom, for example, to be able to take one step forward, or to be able to speak what your heart truly demands against some injustice, and to be seen as true equals. This is the point, that the perception of equality in the other human being is not enough. I can't just promise you that I see you as my equal. I have to act towards that. What does that mean? To really take the place of the other. Can I take the place of the other? can a man really abolish patriarchy and all the privileges that come with the oppression of women in a system? Can you truly take the place? At least imagine that. And that's the birth of empathy and compassion. And so in conclusion, I want to say that Dr. BR Ambedkar, to go back to, you don't have to go back to the first slide, but that idea of his genius, I really would love to know from you. What I believe is that the compassion of mind, heart, spirit, and soul in one human being means that he didn't use one component of his genius to sacrifice the other. They worked in unison. He truly believed and practiced what he preached with the mass conversion to Buddhism. So I invite all of us to partake of this. How do we truly actualize the equality with the other? And I've asked Dr. Suresh and Sanjay and others to think about that, to scale the possibility of Ambedkarite thinking, maybe in a national kind of convention or coalition where we can bring everybody together. We may not agree on all the aspects, but at least to recognize the possibility that we can work in a much larger sphere together than if we work independently. So thank you very much for this. It was a deep honor for me to be here. It's undeserved. The honor is with you, so thank you.